Welcome to Practicing the Way. Before you get started, here are 3 ways to enhance your experience. First, this practice is designed to be done in community, and at practicingtheway.org, you'll find a companion guide and more tools to make this easy to run in a group. Secondly, the best way to start is by taking the Spiritual Health Reflection, a tool to guide you into a deeper layer of self-awareness around your spiritual formation. Finally, we've created a Rule of Life Builder, a digital aid to crafting your first rule in an easy-to-use template. All these resources and more are available for free at practicingtheway.org. Welcome to the Generosity Practice. I'm John Mark.
I'm Yinka.
And I'm Christian, and we're your hosts for this 4-session journey through the way of Jesus.
New Testament scholars estimate that upwards of 25% of Jesus' teachings have to do with money and generosity. Can you imagine if every 4th sermon at your church was on money? Your church would empty out very quickly. But this makes sense. All day long, we make decisions about money. And money often consumes so much of our thought life and emotional energy. And often what we feel is either fear that we won't have enough or desire for more than we need. Every day can feel like fighting a losing battle with worry or greed. Jesus' teachings have the potential to set our heart free from money's grip and to open our heart to true happiness.
We all come with different backgrounds, experiences, and feelings about this part of life. My guess is that some are excited to learn what Jesus has to say about money, while others are likely nervous.
There are a number of legit reasons why talking about money and generosity is complex. It could be fear about what little resources I have, frustration because I'm not very quick to be generous, guilt that I don't have enough, or apprehension because I've experienced people misuse Jesus' teachings on money.
That's why, over the next 4 sessions, we plan to look carefully at what exactly Jesus has to say on this subject, which we've done our best to summarize with these 4 statements. 1, there's more joy in giving than in receiving. 2, watch out for greed. 3, all we have belongs to God. And 4, be generous to the poor. On the docket for today is, there is more joy in giving than receiving.
Each week follows a 4-part learning process. First, we'll gather to learn about generosity. Then, we'll practice it to get the idea of generosity from our head into our body. Before we return, we'll spend a bit of time each week in reflection, learning to pay attention to the work of the Spirit in our hearts. Then, we'll come back together and process in community.
We believe deeply that community is where change happens. So before we begin, circle up with 3 or 4 people, ideally of the same gender, and let's start with a conversation.
Hopefully you have a copy of the companion guide. If not, you can order it online or download a free digital version from our site. Open up to session 1 and talk through the following discussion questions. First, what brought you to this practice? What are you hoping to see God do in your life through it? Second, how were money and generosity handled in your family growing up? Third, what is your primary feeling about money? Fear, desire for more, shame, ambivalence? And fourth, how do you see generosity as a part of your apprenticeship to Jesus?
Take a few minutes to discuss before the teaching.
We all want to be happy. Every person you know is chasing after their vision of a happy life. I live in a nation that was founded on 3 ideals: life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And yet, we are one of the unhappiest nations in the world. It turns out that many of the things that we think will make us happy do not. And the good life is often found in the least expected places, which is why Jesus regularly made bold claims that turn our vision of the good life upside down. He said things like, "The last will be first, and the first will be last." And those who exalt themselves will be humbled, and those who humble themselves will be exalted. Or, bless those who curse you. But one of the most counterintuitive of all Jesus' teachings that goes against everything we hear and even the intuition of our own heart is what he has to say about money and generosity. Listen to this. It is more blessed to give than to receive. The word translated blessed is makarios in Greek, and it means happy or fortunate or well off. It can also be translated, there is more happiness in giving than in receiving, or you're far happier giving than getting. Now, I know what you're thinking right now. Really? Full disclosure, I've been following Jesus for a very long time. But in all honesty, for most of my life, I just did not agree with Jesus on this one. For years, I thought Jesus' teachings on money were right in some kind of religious sense, but not very good. Certainly not the path to true happiness. I could not have been more wrong. All sorts of research from the social sciences has shown that, shocking, Jesus was exactly right. Generous people are happier, healthier, have lower levels of depression and anxiety, are more interested in personal growth, have better relationships. They have a higher life expectancy. One study I read said they literally laugh more. And this is true across every demographic: socioeconomic status, age, gender, ethnicity, personality type. One study called the link between generosity and happiness a, quote, universal feature of human psychology. The sociologists Hilary Davidson and Christian Smith, in their book, The Paradox of Generosity, conclude, people rightly say that money cannot buy happiness. But money and happiness are still related in a curious way. Happiness can be the result not of spending more money on oneself, but rather of giving money away to others. The data examined here show this to be not simply a nice idea, but a social scientific fact. If you take an objective look at the empirical evidence, it's clear that the Western formula of more money equals more happiness is simply not true. Rather, it's the Jesus formula of more generosity equals more happiness that is the pathway to a happy life. The Quaker Richard Foster writes this, "The unreasoned boast abounds that the good life is found in accumulation, that more is better. Indeed, we often accept this notion without question, with the result that the lust for affluence in contemporary society has become psychotic. It has completely lost touch with reality." It comes as no surprise that Jesus said so much about both the danger of money and the possibility of generosity. A key task of our apprenticeship to Jesus is discovering the joy of living a generous life. Now, there are all sorts of expressions of generosity. Generosity of money, of time, of relationship, of gifting, of power and influence. And the main thing you have to give in this season of your life may not be money. It may be something else. But this practice will focus on generosity of money, in part because of the limitations of time, but also because while generosity is far more than the giving of money or resources, it's not less. Over the next 4 sessions, we'll look at Jesus' central teachings on money. To begin, turn to Matthew chapter 6. Listen to Jesus' teaching. Do not store up for yourselves treasures on earth, where moths and vermin destroy and where thieves break in and steal. But store up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where moths and vermin do not destroy and where thieves do not break in and steal. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. I've always been an avid reader, and all through my childhood, I collected vintage Hardy Boys books. And when my wife and I bought our first home, I put them in the garage for a year or so while we were fixing up the house. And when I finally went out to unpack the books, I picked up the box, and the entire bottom just fell out, and all of the books disintegrated into a pile of dust, literally eaten by vermin. A vivid picture of Jesus' wisdom. Jesus is naming this deep impulse in the human heart to store up treasures. The fascinating thing to me is he doesn't rebuke that impulse. For Jesus, the problem isn't so much that we want to store up treasure, it's that we store it up in the wrong place, on earth rather than in heaven. Which here, in context, does not mean the place you go when you die. In heaven was a first century Hebrew way of saying in God, and what he is doing on earth. Then Jesus says, 21, for where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. Notice that for Jesus, money is ultimately about our heart. One of his central insights is that our heart follows our money. We often think it's the opposite. Our money follows our heart, meaning we spend money on what we love and care about, and that's true. But Jesus is saying that it works both ways. We also come to love and worry about and obsess over what we spend our money on. When we store up treasures on earth, our hearts are racked by fear because we know we can lose it all in a moment, or by greed because we never feel like we have enough. But Jesus has an alternative way. 22. The eye is the lamp of the body. If your eyes are healthy, your whole body will be full of light. But if your eyes are unhealthy, your whole body will be full of darkness. If then the light within you is darkness, how great is that darkness? This sounds cryptic to our modern ears, but it's not. It's actually one of my favorite sayings of Jesus. A healthy eye was a figure of speech in Jesus' day. If you have the NIV, there's a footnote after the word healthy that says the Greek for healthy here implies generous. And another one for unhealthy. The Greek for unhealthy here implies stingy. It was a way of saying there are two different ways of looking at the world that have come to be called an abundance mindset and a scarcity mindset. If you have an abundance mindset, you look out on the world and you see a world of abundance. You see God as your Father provider, yourself as his child, and all of life as a gift. This is our Father's world, and it's teeming with more than enough for everyone. You look around and you say with Jesus, look at the birds. And as a result, you live with gratitude toward God and generosity toward your neighbor. You receive and you give both with joy. A first century Hebrew would say, you have a healthy eye. You have a healthy view of the world. But if you have a scarcity mindset, you look out at the world and you see a world of lack. There's no father provider. You're on your own. The world is a dangerous place. Human civilization is a fierce battle over scarce resources. Wealth is a zero-sum game. You need to look out for number one because it's dog-eat-dog out there. Your vision is focused on what you have, but you are scared you may lose, or what you don't have and you want. Your heart is consumed by fear and greed. If this is you, Jesus would say, you have an unhealthy eye. You have a distorted view of the world. Abundance and scarcity, two very different ways of seeing life in general and money in particular. Two people can have the exact same income, cost of living, and economic responsibility, but see the world in radically different ways. especially if one of them grew up in poverty or in an unsafe home or unstable family? How do you see the world? If you had absolute assurance that God would provide enough for you, how would that change your relationship to money and generosity? You see, if we come to trust Jesus' vision of abundance and of God as our Father provider, then his teachings on money start to make sense. Do not worry, seek first the kingdom, give and it will be given to you. As a result, we are free to be generous with what we have. But if we don't believe, then we read Jesus' teachings, and honestly, he sounds a bit unhinged. Generosity sounds not only foolish, but dangerous, and we are enslaved by fear and greed. Which is why Jesus goes on to say, 24, no one can serve two masters. Either you will hate the one and love the other, or you will be devoted to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve both God and money. Some translations have, you cannot serve both God and mammon, which is an Aramaic word. The Gospels were written in Greek because it was the lingua franca of the ancient world, but Jesus likely spoke in Aramaic. Matthew left this particular word untranslated. Scholars think it was because the word mammon was the name for the ancient Syrian god of wealth. It was Jesus' way of saying money is like a rival god. We want so badly to believe that money is neutral. It's not good or bad. It's just about the heart. But for Jesus, wealth is powerful. And the sway it has over our hearts is often a demonically animated force at work in our soul and society. Entire sectors of our economy are run by the worship of mammon. The god of mammon is behind so much evil and injustice, war, racism, ecological devastation, and more. Hence, you cannot serve both God and mammon. Not you should not, not hey, you should kind of rethink that. No, you cannot. It's not that it's bad, it's that it's impossible. Mammon will take over your heart unless you find a way to resist its gravitational pull. How? According to Jesus, through living with a healthy eye, through generosity. Now, Jesus is a brilliant sage, and I want you to see he's teaching on at least 3 levels here. People who study how we learn tell us there's a progression from the head to the heart to the hands, or from kind of ideas to feelings to behavior. Jesus is teaching on all 3 levels. First, Jesus is teaching his apprentices about how to see God and our life in God's world, about what kind of universe we find ourselves in, where the good life is to be found, and ultimately, who God himself is. A biblical theology of generosity does not start with tithing or even with Jesus' command to be generous to the poor. It starts before time and space with who God is. God is our Father. My kids don't worry about rent or groceries or medical bills because they have a father and mother who provide for them. Jesus said we don't have to worry about what we will eat or drink or wear because God is our Father. Not only is God Father, but he is Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. He is a family of self-giving, other-centered, joyful, sacrificial, generous love. Generosity is grounded in the triune nature of God. Also, generosity is woven through the library of Scripture. From page 1, where God says, I give you every seed-bearing plant for food. From day 1, God is giving, blessing, loving all the way up to Jesus. And generosity is at the heart of the gospel itself. The Father gave the Son. The Son gave his life. The Father and Son gave the Holy Spirit. Even forgiving is an expression of giving. Is this how you see the gospel? How you see God himself as the most generous being in all of reality, and how you see your life in God's world? Secondly, Jesus is teaching his apprentices about the architecture of our hearts. Billy Graham once said, if a person gets his attitude toward money straight, it will help straighten out almost every other area in his life. That's right in line with Jesus' teaching from Matthew 6. Get your relationship to money right, and it will set your heart free. If we apprentice under Jesus, it should change our relationship to money, because it should change our heart. That's why generosity is way more than just tithing or even acts of radical generosity where we give large portions of our resources away. It's also about buying your friend coffee or welcoming people to your dinner table or being quick to forgive when you are hurt. Because generosity isn't just about our behavior, it's about our inner nature. It's about the heart. That said, Jesus is teaching his apprentices about the practice of generosity. All the research on generosity says the same thing, that for generosity to make you happier and healthier and the rest, it can't be a one-time event or even random acts of kindness. It has to be a practice. And in the same way that practicing gratitude will make you into a more thankful, content person, practicing generosity will make you into a more generous, free person. I can't flip a switch and remove all fear and greed from my heart. But I can sponsor a child. I can buy someone lunch this week. I can give a portion of my income away every month with special attention to the poor, the church, and the gospel. And as I practice generosity and make space for God to move in my heart, he can change my whole life from the inside out. Generosity is a practice by which we index our heart from a scarcity mindset to the abundance mindset of Jesus. From fear of lack to trust in God our Father. From worry over our future to peace whatever comes. From the endless desire for more to the enjoyment of what we have. From grasping to gratitude, and from misery to joy. The practice of generosity can do all this and more in our heart. To end, think for a moment of the most generous person you know. They may not be wealthy at all, but they are generous. Draw them to mind. Are they joyful? I bet you're smiling right now because the answer is likely, yes, they are. I have yet to meet an unhappy, generous person. That's likely why I have also yet to meet a former giver. I'm sure they exist, but all the people I know who discovered the joy of generosity never turned back. Instead, they became increasingly radicalized to the way of Jesus and deeply happy. I could not be more excited to practice generosity with you over the next few weeks. My prayer for you is to begin to tap into the joy at the heart of the Father and the Son and the Spirit. It will cost you, literally, to put Jesus' teachings into practice, but you will get back far more than you give away, because there is more joy in giving than receiving.
Before we lay out this week's practice, we want to give you a few minutes to process the teaching together.
Here are a few questions to guide your time. First, whether you were the giver or recipient, share about a time where you experienced the joy of generosity. Second, What fears or desires keep you from being generous? Is it a scarcity mindset, a need for security, greed, or something else? Third, how would your life be different if you were free of the fear of not having enough? And fourth, what is one act of generosity you can do this week that will counter the fear you may carry?
Go ahead and discuss.
Hi, we're Jim and Jan Basinius, and we've been on a journey of generosity now for about the past 40 years. My friend Tony gave me a phone call and he asked me, do you tithe? And I said, yeah, I tithe. He said, gross or net? I said, none of your business. And he said, come on, we know each other, we're friends. And he said to me, I'll never forget it, he said, I know about how much money I manage, and I know about how much money you manage, and you manage a lot more than I do. And I give 50%. And I'm like, what? I had never heard of anyone in my life who gave half of what they made.
Jim and I both heard a sermon when we were brand new Christians, and it was about spiraling affluence. And the guy said, I'm not going to set your boundaries for you, but there needs to be a time where you say, we have enough, and the excess goes to the kingdom. And I think we both believe that and have lived that way since then. We have enough, and the rest goes to the kingdom. And we love doing that and love being stewards of that.
We so believe everything we have is from him. So to not look at yourself as a steward and how much can I share, and and be pretty specific about that would just be a big miss in life. And to me, as a business guy, we wanted to make great, what we call kingdom investments in great people doing great work. Loved starting things up if we could. And, it's been a joy, absolute joy. I've got some grandkids that I take to breakfast once a week whenever we can do this. And after breakfast, we run to Fred Meyer's, a local store, we get flowers, and we pray, Lord, who do you want us to give the flowers to? It's going up to strangers. I let the boys pick out who they want to give to. And they love doing this. At first, they didn't like it at all. Now they never let me not do it, even if we're short on time. But Lord, who do you want us to give to? Let's cheer them up. And so, for us, this is a very serious thing, but it's just a joyful thing. And I think that the more we improve our giving skills, the more we enjoy our lives.
Each week, we'll offer you a spiritual exercise to take the teaching and put it into practice, just like Jesus said. Everything we offer is invitational. We make recommendations, you make decisions. Just know that what will change your life isn't hearing about generosity, but practicing generosity.
For week one's practice, we have a simple goal. We want you to experience the joy of generosity. So our exercise for this week is to practice a spontaneous act of generosity. Set aside a specific amount of money, as much or as little as you want. And we recommend you take cash out of an ATM or set aside an amount in your checking account and have your card ready to go when the right opportunity comes. Pray and ask God to give you an opportunity to bless someone. And then just keep your eyes open for the opportunity.
See, it could be like buying coffee for someone in line behind you or anonymously paying for a family's dinner. You could send money to a friend to help with that unexpected expense or a medical bill. You could share a gift with someone in need of encouragement or buy someone's groceries. See, we've gotten a lot of joy from going to the grocery store and putting together a care bag when we hear that someone's having a rough time. There's so many ways to be creative about generosity. So when the opportunity arises, don't wait or second guess. Just do something Jesus-y or generous.
The aim isn't to be heroic or solve all the world's issues in a day, but to tap into the outflow of the Trinity's generosity to all. For those of you who have the time, energy, and desire to take it one step further, each week we'll offer you a reach exercise. This week's reach exercise is to up your spontaneous act of generosity in either frequency or intensity. By frequency, we mean practice spontaneous generosity 2 or 3 times this week or even every day. It can be $5 here and $10 there. It doesn't have to be wildly expensive or elaborate. Just take small, frequent steps in generosity. Or you can try upping the intensity, meaning giving in a larger, more sacrificial way. Maybe like us, you've been saving for something you need like a car, or maybe you've been saving for something fun like a trip, ticket, sauna, a surfboard. Take that money and give it away to the poor, or your church, or someone you know in need. We recommend that you pray about it, and if you feel stirring in your heart to give in this way, do it. And as you give, watch what happens in your heart.
On that note, a key part of this 4-week practice is a simple 10-minute weekly practice reflection. In your guide is a 1-page guided reflection for you to do at the end of each week before you come back together for the next session. It's designed to get you to pay attention to the inner movements of your heart as you practice generosity.
We also invite you to begin this practice with a spiritual health reflection, a self-assessment tool to help you better name Jesus' invitation to you at your stage in the spiritual journey. It's available for free through our site, and please set aside a little time to work through the questions.
Finally, a book alongside of practice is the optimal way to enhance your learning experience. Our recommended reading for this practice is Giving is the Good Life by Randy Alcorn. This week, we're reading chapters 1 through 4.
We also have a companion podcast available where we get into all that we didn't have time to cover in this session and explore generosity in more depth. It's called Rule of Life from Practice in the Way. And this week, we're listening to part 1.
Let us bless you before you go. Our benediction in this practice is adapted from 2 Corinthians 9, 8 through 11.
May God bless you abundantly, so that in all things, at all times, you may have all that you need. May you freely scatter your gifts to the poor. May God, who supplies seed to the sower and bread for food, also supply and increase all your store of seed and enlarge the harvest of your righteousness. May you be enriched in every way, so that you can be generous on every occasion, and may your generosity result in thanksgiving to God.